Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, our third winner is from Keansburg, New Jersey. Keansburg Beachfront Restoration Project implemented a multi-million-dollar, multi-phased beachfront project. The borough of Keansburg successfully restored 2.5 miles of shoreline that was destroyed by Superstorm Sandy. The coastal New Jersey town along the Raritan Bay accomplished the beachfront restoration, utilizing 1.1 million cubic yards of sand and reconstructed 10,000 square feet of bay walk. The beachfront restoration project fortified the borough's storm resiliency in addition to creating a more robust, damage-resistant bay walk. The presentation is going to be made by Ed Stridle from the borough of Keansburg. Edward?
Lee, thank you. This is Bob Euro from T&M Associates. Before Ed starts, Annie is going to run our video in the background while Ed speaks, but just a precursor. We're going to be a little bit lighter with our presentation and not so technical in nature. We're going to show where Keansburg was after Superstorm Sandy in 2012 and where we are today. So Ed, take yourself off mute and it's all yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Ed Stridle, and seated to my right here is Michelle Huff. Michelle is our recreation director and handles the activities that we are now able to provide to our guests and our residents. Just to give you a little layout of our land, Keansburg is located in the country known as the Bayshore. We are on the East Coast. We're a close-knit community, mainly blue-collar workers. We have approximately 10,000 residents. That actually dropped probably by about 10% as a result of Sandy and the devastation that we encountered during those couple nights. We were ravaged, the community was ravaged by Superstorm Sandy. Much of our beach sand wound up probably 10 blocks inland. As you can see from some of the pictures here, it shifted some homes off of their foundations. And we were left with kind of a mess. The main reason for our dune system is a flood protection area. And we had been petitioning FEMA to make renovations and restorations to it. But in today's day and age, funding is always an issue. It ultimately took us about 2 years to finally convince them that the actual length that the dune system had lasted and our beach had lasted was just about 50 years from when they first installed it. We ultimately wound up having 3 locations where the dune actually breached, and hence that's why we had the bay enter into our town. And in many parts of the town, we had approximately 5 feet of water in the streets. As a result of a federal, state, and local effort, we were able to get FEMA to come in and assist us in approximately a $30 million project in dredging sand from the ocean area, barging it in, and then repumping it and distributing it onto our beachfront. After many years of hard work, we now have an area where when we turn it over to Michelle, she makes the best use of it and schedules a lot of activities for the enjoyment of the community and neighboring states. Even this past year, where 2020, the era of COVID, was everyone was locked down. we were able to maintain some type of activities going on, still keeping social distance. Many stayed within their own little groups. This particular photo is an event that predates Sandy. However, we now are able to have our activities and enjoyment. Should be noted that we have a view from our particular shore to the New York skyline that I would put up against most any other view on an ocean front. The reason being, and when you look out at an ocean, 3 o'clock in the morning, you're probably going to see a dark area. You may see some buoys, but you do not have the scenic beauty that we are able to see, weather providing, almost every night. We've also been able to enhance our activities. Exercise areas. And there's what you see at night. It's a breathtaking view, and we now hope that we can maintain it. Our intention and our view somewhat for the future is that studies have been conducted that for every dollar that is put into a mitigation project, such as beach restoration, dune restoration, shoreline activities, for every dollar that's invested, you're going to prevent $6 of disaster costs as a result of sea level rise or storms or hurricanes, whatever. Surely in today's changing economic times, funding designated to beach restoration is a great investment and an idea that we can all benefit from. We'd like to thank the American Shore and Beach Preservation Association and all who have made this possible, and are honored to receive the award along with the other winners who are here this afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Edward. It's a very informative presentation, and I think it shows that the demonstrated need for improving coastal resiliency along our coastal towns. Our fourth winner is Noriego Point, Florida. The Noriego Point Stabilization and Restoration Project's primary objective was to provide Destin, Florida residents and tourists with more diverse recreational opportunities, such as a protected swimming area and an extensive shoreline for boat and beach access. This project created approximately 1,200 feet of publicly accessible recreational shoreline by rehabilitating existing groin structures and installing new T-head groins. The project also included dune restoration and revegetation with native plants. The presentation is going to be made by Duncan Greer from Taylor Engineering and Pierce Barrett from Florida DEP, Department of Deepwater Horizon Division of Water Resources, Recreation Assistant. That is just a mouthful. I apologize for butchering that, but please take it away.
No problem. Happy to be here. Again, I'm Duncan Greer with Taylor Engineering, and we're accepting this award on behalf of FDEP and the City of Destin. This is the Noriego Point project. I've got a quick little video to introduce the project area and everything to everybody. So Noriego Point is a landmark and East Pass of Destin, Florida. And it's a natural sand feature, boaters destination. The point serves as a protective barrier to the navigation channel entering Destin Harbor, that it contains the Destin Harbor commercial fishing fleet. and a very important characteristic of Destin. Prior to stabilization, Noriega Point was very vulnerable to storms and erosion, sand transport associated with those. That erosion impacted the harbor and the navigation channels by resulting in frequent dredging maintenance, and it left the fishing fleet vulnerable due to breaches during severe hurricane events. So the restoration project overall involves 3 components. That is shoreline stabilization, beach and dune restoration, and recreational components. And overall, we restored along East Pass approximately 1,200 feet of shoreline, and resulting in a total 13-acre park. Taylor Engineering provided the design engineering services for all 3 phases of the project. So again, we're here in Destin, Florida, up in the Panhandle. And a quick project overview. You can see this is East Pass in Okaloosa County. Destin is on the northeast corner. Running north-south along the view here is the Federal Navigation Channel. At the bottom is the Gulf of Mexico, and the top, Choctawhatchee Bay. The small body of water on the right side of the screen is Destin Harbor, and you can see the Destin Harbor entrance channel coming off the Federal Navigation Channel just north of Noriega Point, our project site. Here's a little zoom into the project area. You can see kind of the old existing shoreline kind of meandered along the pass and the Destin Harbor, causing some maintenance issues. And here you can see kind of the overlay of our fill area, the dune outline, and our T-groin structures, the Ts. Objectives obviously include to increase storm protection to Destin Harbor, but also I think, and most importantly for this project, is reducing maintenance dredging frequency in Destin Harbor and the adjacent Federal Navigation channels. And so this presented an opportunity, the funding presented an opportunity for the state and local governments to fulfill inlet management recommendations and increase recreational access, which is really important in Destin. So we can provide additional recreational opportunities, increase ADA access as a part of the NERDA project, which has a lot to do with recreation. And we can also increase habitat for endangered shorebirds along the dune system. Project team, the owners of the project are FDEP and the City of Destin. Taylor Engineering as the design and consulting engineering firm. Project manager for the stabilization portion was Matt Trammell, was one of the design engineers underneath Matt, and I'm the engineer of record for the future recreational facilities project that I'll show you at the very end of the presentation. Construction contractor was Lure Brothers, and dredging contractor was Inland Dredging. So just a quick note about funding. Funding was provided by FDEP's Deepwater Horizon program, using funding from the natural resource damage assessment resulting from the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill, and also Beaches Funding Program grant provided by DEP's Office of Resilience and Coastal Protection. So as a part of this presentation, we're going to go through some of the challenges of the project and then solutions to each one of those challenges. This is a very aggressive and active environment. We are in East Pass, which is subject to waves and coastal forcings from the Gulf of Mexico that come through the throat of East Pass and directly affect our project site. In terms of activity, it's also highly utilized by recreational vessels as well as commercial charter vessels, et cetera. So, and as well as beachgoers that are accessing the site from land as well. So we also had some existing structures and variable bathymetry to deal with during design, and that kind of presented some challenges during construction, just in terms of sheet pile driving with historic rock locations and this and that. We had limits of existing regulatory authorizations when Taylor Engineering took on the project. There were natural resources that needed to be avoided, and the project had a fixed budget and schedule. So some solutions to the aggressive and active environment included value engineering and construction phasing. In order to accomplish this project and not have all of our structures over-designed, we needed to phase the project in a way that allowed for the sheet piles not to be over designed, for us not to have too much rock, too many mattresses, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a very large part of this project. Very aggressive environment in terms of actual construction. And then, when it comes to public interaction and maintaining navigability during construction, we also had some additional challenges there. So in terms of the existing structures and the bathymetry and those sorts of challenges, and this goes back to our value engineering, we wanted to reduce the structures as much as possible to meet the project budget. And but in that, we still needed to have it be designed in terms of risk analysis to allow for the structures to maintain stability, long-term durability in this very active and aggressive environment, including really strong current flows and a lot of sand movement. You can kind of see that in some of these aerials during construction. One thing to point out is just trying to maintain sand tightness in the existing structures. We tried to use a lot of lightweight sheet piles and with some kind of field placed accuracy in order to maintain sand tightness in those older structures, but also to kind of vary our structure foundation to where we only excavated where we really needed to, just at this toe of the structures. And this cross section here doesn't do it a whole lot of justice. In some areas we were excavating, 4 to 8 feet at that toe in order to achieve that design, scour protection. So some notes there. Again, a lot to talk about on this project, but I'm going to keep it as brief as possible just for time. I know Annie's got to keep on schedule to meet the rest of the awesome job on the presentation so far. So solutions to limits of regulatory authorizations. The project as originally designed, there wasn't enough sand to actually fill the template of Noriega Point. So having a lot to do with the inlet management for East Pass for the city of Destin and Okaloosa County, Taylor Engineering knew that there was sand available in the north navigation channel that hadn't been dredged in quite some time, but we knew it was available, and we modified the East Pass navigation dredging permits in order to obtain additional sand, which actually ended up causing, and we anticipated this, some regulatory challenges because, as you can see in this bottom right photo, these dredge areas approached seagrasses and an outstanding Florida waterway boundary very, very closely. So in order to do this, we needed to meet strict regulatory compliance requirements and do a lot of regulatory coordination in order to get approval to dredge this area in such close proximity to seagrass. Again, fixed budget and schedule. Our solution to that was having detailed construction documents, a lot of local active project management, but also incorporating contingencies within our contract documents. So, should the contractor run into sheet pile driving issues, considering that we were proposing, composite sheet piles, we had mandrels as a part of the contract that could be used if needed. And again, just a lot of small field changes, difficult conditions during construction. So a lot of active management and coordination. Just a little note on project quantities. Total project cost was $10.5 million. That actually was accomplished without any cost change orders. The stabilized shoreline is approximately 2,100 feet in total. Beach area created was approximately 8 acres with 5 acres of dune vegetation. Some other metrics here, if anybody's interested, approximately 143,000 cubic yards of compatible beach fill that was harvested from the navigation channels, and a lot of core and armor stone, significant amount of sheet piles and marine mattresses to construct those, call them hybrid T growing structures with a rock tee and a light sheet pile composite wall that extended landward of the T. So here's some fun little progression of aerials, and this kind of can give us a good understanding of how the project progressed. So here we are prior to construction in October 2017, and then moving into 2018, you can see the sheet pile starting to be driven in the northwest corner. And you can see them placing the steel template and driving those composite walls to encapsulate the point. And here they are placing the marine mattresses for scour protection and conducting all the excavation and some initial rock placement. You can see that progressing along the point there. And here you can see the dredging has just started. And so you can see a little sand up in the tip. And moving here, you can see the dredge, and you can see this close proximity here to existing structures, and you can see the navigability issues that was created by the old point as it encroached on the Destin Harbor navigation channel. So here you see the dredging starting as they're filling the point and cutting some of that material that was within the navigation channel or very close to it. You can see the grading going on and the beach fill progressing. And progressing again and again. Here you can see a little bit of the footprints of the caps that were poured and placed following the sand fill placement. So there's concrete caps along this the sheet pile wall that extended to kind of enclose this northern tip, just to kind of maintain sand. Sorry about that. In case of a severe event, but moving forward, you can see final grading, the creation and definition of that dune structure along the point, the sand fencing being added, vegetation, and this is October 2018. This is, I believe, right before Hurricane Michael affected our project area. So that definitely affected plant survivability, but come 2 years later, we are seeing significant establishment of that vegetation along the dune, and ultimately a very successful restoration. So before, looking from the south north along the point, you can see what Noriega Point looked there. You can see the exposed sheet piles of these old structures and whatnot. And then the after photo, again, looking north from the south of the project site. And then we have one looking from the north, look at the south, into Destin Harbor and East Pass. And this is immediately after grading prior to vegetation, but it was the most comparable shot to that we had. So here you can see our restored beach, and you can see that there's just a lot of sand moving in along these rock structures, just telling you how variable this environment is. A little bit of erosion as anticipated in these embayments, but allowing for a lot of really, fairly safe recreational access along East Pass here, much more safe than previously. So future phase of the project will include recreational access structures such as dune walkovers and a harborside boardwalk, restroom and ADA access facility, as well as a roadway to actually be able to access these features from land. That's it for me. I appreciate the time, and again, the opportunity to present this project and accept this award on behalf of the City of Destin and DEP. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thanks, Duncan. That's a pretty impressive project there. So well deserving your award. Our last presentation is Tybee Island, Georgia. Tybee Island, Georgia increased their resiliency to flooding events while enhancing natural habitat, including federally protected sea turtle nesting sites and endangered bird species that are so vital to the environmental and economic health of the city. It is the first time the city built dunes as an integral resiliency feature, augmenting a federal beach nourishment project. Approximately 1.3 million cubic yards of sands was placed along 15,000 feet of shoreline, including 70,000 cubic yards of sand for the dune construction. The presentation will be made by Sean Gillian, the Tybee Island City Manager. Sean?
Thank you very much. I have with me today Mayor Shirley Sessions and Alan Robertson, who was the consultant, who was the project manager on the project. They're in the room with me today. Tybee Island is a barrier island just off the shore from Savannah, Georgia. We're the easternmost point of the state of Georgia. There's several things, a lot going on around the city of Tybee. We've got the channel that feeds the Savannah port, which is, depending on who you ask, one of the top third, second, or first largest port in the nation. So we have the shipping channel that comes in and out, and then specifically has been one of the reasons for the erosion of the beach. The natural flow of the sand southward from the Carolinas gets stopped at that channel. And there was a study done by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers that showed that 78% of their beach erosion was caused by that shipping channel. And so that is the reason for our long-term partnership with the U.S. Corps of Engineers. And we're a large tourist destination, and we get approximately 1.1 million visitors a year to the island. We're 4 square miles, and we have 3,000 year-round residents, but 1.1 million visitors per year. So the visiting density is quite large, and this is a huge tourist destination for not only the locals, but from all over the country. On the backside of the island is the marsh area, which is something that we've been trying to resolve with the flooding issues that we saw in some of the hurricanes. We're also protected habitat for a lot of wildlife. So the sea turtle habitat is a major part of what we do and how we manage our beach. So that plays a major role in that. It's also a place for a lot of nesting birds. Tybee Island had been a long time since it had a impact from a storm. And in 2016, Hurricane Matthew hit. 11 months later, Hurricane Irma hit. And then after that was, Michael and Dorian and all these different storms that either didn't directly hit us, but had a lot of storm action offshore that created the wave action that just exacerbated the storm damage from Matthew and Irma. I was on the job for 93 days here in Tybee when Hurricane Irma hit, and learning how to evacuate a city and learning how to recover from the flooding that went on during those was a challenge. So we learned a lot during Hurricane Sandy from the folks our friends up on the northern part of the East Coast and what they had to do. And then the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and the sea level rise adaptation study that was done just prior to Matthew. And then we had Matthew hit. And then after Irma, we did a full assessment of what our issues were. And we noticed that a lot of our vehicular access points to the beach were at grade, which then became rivers during the storm surge. And there were some other more vulnerable points of the island where dunes were not naturally a part of the process. So that got us moving towards incorporating dunes into our renourishment project. In 2018, we received a grant from the state to get sand on the beach in some form or another, and we have focused that effort on the dune project. Then we had an evacuation during Hurricane Dorian. We were fortunate, Dorian shifted seaward, but we still saw a lot of wave action. And then we've been hit with a storm pretty much every year, directly or indirectly. And the other piece of the puzzle is the backside flooding that we see from the marshes that we've now gone after funding for an assessment that hopefully will lead to funding for some implementation of something to help address the flooding that we see from the backside of the island in the marsh area. This is the assessment map that we use. So we're looking at the areas that were wide open and where we had established dunes. That was in red, where we had an established dune system, where we had a weaker dune system. And the red lines you see running perpendicular to the beach, those are the vehicular access points that were at grade. And so we saw a lot of water just flow right through that area. Phase one of our dune project was from that pier structure at the top of your picture down to the bottom of that in that red area. This was sand that we had trucked in from a sand quarry, and 1,400 trucks for 50 days. So it was 6 days a week. For 6 weeks, we had trucks flowing into the city day after day after day to bring sand in to build this dune. This was the most vulnerable point during Hurricane Irma and Matthew. There was literally nothing between the ocean and those businesses along the Strand Avenue there. And that's where we saw the water just flow right in and flood every single one of those businesses. So that was a main focal point that we had. We wanted to get that dune built first. And that's why the trucked in sand rather than waiting for money to flow from the hurricane, then FEMA relief efforts. So this was something that was unique to this project. This is our 19th Street crossover. This is what it looked like prior to our dune build. And that's the grade access point. So we needed to have a dune and we needed a vehicular access point. So we went to the DNR and we sat down with them and said, there are some options out there for building a reinforced dune. So we got with the company called Guardian and put in a sandbag system underneath the dune to where this is what it looks like now. And that's a drivable portion of our dune. You could drive a semi truck over that. It won't collapse the dune, but that's our emergency access point and our maintenance access point. And now with the continuation of the dunes, we have 3 other access points built to those same standards. This was the first time the DNR in Georgia had allowed this to be done. And we're awful proud of that project. It worked out really well. So in July of 2017, this is a before picture of what we had. Before the dune was built, I think you can see it up here. This is where we built the first part of the dune. And that's what it looks like after the dune was built. But you also notice, you'll see the storm damage from Matthew, Irma, and the subsequent offshore storms. At high tide, there was no beach along here. At high tide, the beach got up into the new dune system and actually started to erode that new dune a little bit prior to beach renourishment from last year. This is the before picture of that same area of the beach where the majority of our sand was put into place. And that's what it looks like post renourishment. One of the most amazing things is that you could walk at low tide, you could walk in front of the pier on the beach. Now we know that the further you go out, the faster the sand erodes. So we're going to lose some of that beach last year and this year. So, but this was the size of the beach afterward, which was amazing to look at from the visible difference between the year before, which was some of the worst erosions we've seen in decades. This is the dune project going northward, phase 2 of our dune. This was the area of the island that had no natural dune growth of any significance. This is the nodal point. The way the currents flow at that point of the island just erodes the beach. And there's no sand to blow or to wash to make a dune. And this is where we saw some of the worst effects during Irma and the subsequent storms. You can see the dune right here and the crossovers that we were building over those to get the access point. And you notice there's no vegetation on those yet. That comes a little later. But briefly, the whole project was 15,000 linear feet, 1.3 million cubic yards of sand, with the total cost of running in about $15 million. 70,000 cubic yards of sand was used to build those dunes. So this is the vegetation project we did. So to stabilize the dunes, we vegetated that entire length of the dune project. 270,000 plants were hand planted on the dune project to stabilize them. And then the sand fencing. This sand fencing orientation was allowed by the DNR to allow us to put that in there. You can see the sand accumulation already in the early days of the project. And those sand dunes accumulation, even in the areas where we didn't have natural dune systems growing, we're seeing dunes start to naturally grow around those sand fencing because of the availability of sand, because from the dunes itself. But that's working better than we expected. So this project would not have been possible without a lot of partnerships and a lot of friends in some of the organizations we work with, particularly the DNR, their Georgia Coastal Management Program, and the DNR's Department of Natural Resources, the Coastal Resources Division of the Department of Natural Resources. They were the first ones we sat down with, along with the Corps of Engineers, U.S. Department of Agriculture, Georgia Southern University, University of Georgia, Sea Grant, Georgia, and the National, the NIFWIF, the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation has been a partner with us in a couple of ways. And one is that Bax River, the backside of the island, is a way to, how do we deal with the flooding from the backside of the island? National Academy of the Sciences and the Skidaway Institute of Oceanography. So all of these partners were instrumental in coming up with the assessment of what our need was, coming up with the assessment of what to do to do those needs, and how do we monitor that. So just last week, we had the Skidaway Institute out, and they were flying their drones over the dunes and taking some magical engineering measurement to tell us how much the dunes have grown and how much the beach has eroded. And we have entering into a contract tonight at the city council meeting to extend that agreement with them for another year to monitor this. So now going into the future, we're going to have really hard data to talk about what does the beach look like after a renourishment and subsequent years afterwards. How do the dunes grow with in certain areas? We're going to have real hard data. In the past, we had to rely on anecdotal evidence of stories told by the old timers that remembered when the beach was at a certain point and the seawall was still exposed and that sort of thing. So we're going to have some real hard data to deal with. So we're really excited. I'm going to introduce real quickly our mayor, Mayor Shirley Sessions, who has the award with her. We really want to thank one of the main partners in this, the ASBPA itself. And I'm going to turn my camera so you can see Mayor Sessions. And so
we're so proud. We're very, very appreciative of all of those who actually helped recognize all of the communities that are doing so much. I've been so impressed with every presentation. It's very, 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 very impressive. So thank you to the advocacy for those who appreciate and value what the communities are doing. And we're very proud of our efforts. And Alan Robertson is with us. He led much of this, and he is responsible for literally getting so many of the grants that we were awarded. And we're just very, very pleased to have this opportunity. So thank you so much. And please, you're all invited to Tybee. If you come down, we'll give you a tour. We'll take you to lunch, and we will show you our new Marine Science Center that's built on the north end of the island. So come on down. We'd love to see you.
thank you, Mayor. This project has been a lot of fun for me to learn about beaches. Day one getting here, this is what we were talking about, and it's really great to see the project come to fruition. Thank you all, and thanks to everybody at the ASBPA. And y'all have a great day.
Thank you, Sean. I want to thank all our presenters. And now, since we're running a little bit behind, I'll turn it directly back to Lynette. Lynette?
Yeah, fantastic. What a great tour around the United States. How very fun on a Thursday afternoon. Congratulations to our 2020 winners. And just a reminder, the applications are open for nominations for 2021. The Best Restored Beaches are due April 30th, and the Best Restored Shores are July 16th. So looking forward to seeing those. We're going to roll right into our next panel, and this is on funding for coastal restoration projects. We have three speakers, the first of which is Erica Feller, Director of Marine and Coastal Conservation at the National Fish and Wildlife Federation. Suzanne Simon, representing NEP Coastal Watersheds Grant Program Director. She's from Restore America's Estuaries. And Chris Darnell from National Coastal Wetland Conservation Grant Program, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Now, take a look at their bios in the program. We're going to keep on going. And what we're doing today is a bit of a mix of a presentation as well with some panel. Our speakers, they'll go in order as they were introduced. We'll give some opening statements if they've got a slide or two. But a lot of the magic will happen when we're in the panel discussion. So please feel free to put your questions in the chat box, and I will hand it over to Erica. Welcome.
Thank you. And I was so excited that I tuned in just to hear about the city of Tybee Island, because I'm like, hey, wait a second, we funded that. So I'm Erica Feller. I'm the Director for Coastal and Marine Conservation at the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, that for all of our benefit, I'm going to refer to as NIFWF for here on out. And I'm here to talk about the National Coastal Resilience Fund. So I have just a couple slides, even though I told Lynette I wouldn't. There we go. Hopefully you guys can see that. So the National Coastal Resilience Fund was established in 2018, and it started out as a partnership between NIFWF and NOAA, and it's to fund the implementation of natural and nature-based projects that will do two things: reduce communities' exposure to coastal flooding risks and conserve habitat for fish and wildlife. And so the slide up here is showing all of our partners. We started out with NOAA, and then Shell and TransRe were kind of our founding partners for this program in 2018. And today we're in our 4th year of the fund, and we have since then welcomed the EPA Gulf of Mexico Division, the Department of Defense, AT&T, and Occidental to the partnership, which is really, really great. So the Coastal Resilience Fund invests in projects that are led by states, tribes, local governments, NGOs, and others that will help communities advance projects that provide the dual benefits, the reduced exposure and the habitat at a meaningful scale for that community. And so how do we do that? Our approach with this program is to meet communities where they are. And we take this pipeline approach to investment. There we go, which I can show you what that looks like. So we have funding available for project implementation, taking a project to construction. Obviously, we can fund things at a pretty decent scale of investment. I think we've had projects as small as $500,000, as large as just around $5 million. We're kind of waiting for somebody to come in and ask us for even more than that. But we also know that not everybody has a shovel-ready project. That's actually a pretty big hurdle to clear. And so, you know, we have the ability to also fund design and engineering that will get a project to the point where you've got final designs, permits, at least ready to apply for, if not already in hand, to get that project to the point where it is shovel ready. We also recognize not everybody knows what they want to design, what specific kind of project they actually want to do the design and engineering for. So we fund also site assessment and preliminary design. And generally, we say that these are projects that will lead us to about a 30 to 60% design, but that part really doesn't matter. What matters in this category is that these are really supposed to be projects that get you to that go, no-go point of, do you want to actually move it forward? And then finally, we've kind of recognized, particularly in the first 2 years of this program, that a lot of communities have an interest in nature-based features. They know that they have flooding risks, but really the planning, the coordination, the vulnerability assessments, the stakeholder engagement, all the things you need to do to sort of think about what that plan for a community looks like. In a lot of places, that really hasn't happened yet. So in 2020, we created a community capacity building and planning category. And this is a little different to the other three. The other three are really geared towards getting a project implemented. With community capacity building and planning, we absolutely want people to invest in projects where they're going to identify nature-based features that they want to build and that are going to provide real good benefits for their community. But we see this as an opportunity. There are a lot of different programs out there that provide funding for coastal resilience, for nature-based features, and for a lot of other kind of related activities related to habitat restoration or economic development and this sort of thing. We get really excited when we see community capacity building and planning projects come in where the community is saying, we want to go big. We want to think about all of these things under one planning process and try and find where co-benefits are. And 2020 was the first year that we funded these projects, and the ones we funded have a lot of this kind of stuff going on, which is really, really exciting. So we ask our applicants to apply under one of these categories. We don't fund design build projects. We don't fund planning, community planning and design projects. You pick one, and then we want people to come back to us when they're ready to move on to the next stage. We call these pipeline projects. They get sort of an extra boost of priority because we really do want to see people move forward and move things to implementation. And then finally, we want to see strong stakeholder engagement every step of the way, from community planning all the way up to implementation. And we will also fund, we're happy to fund tried and true nature-based features, but we're also really excited to fund innovative approaches as well. I should mention there are a few things that we are not that interested in. They're up on your screen. We're not doing rebuilds. This isn't a research program, all that kind of stuff. And the big news is this request for proposals is open right now. Pre-proposals are due on April 7th. And I put up here on the screen just some information to kind of, if you're interested in following up with this program, this is where you can go. All the contacts, we have regional leads. So if you want to talk to somebody who's an expert on Alaska or California, you can call FEMCA. Same Great Lakes, you can call ASLN, and they are happy to talk project ideas with you. So there's a lot of ways that we think this program has been really successful to date. And I think there's a lot of ways to think about that. But ultimately, what we want to know is that we're funding projects that are having an impact on habitat and on reducing communities' exposure to coastal flooding risks. And at the front end, this really matters where you invest. We want projects that have been identified through some kind of resilience planning process. But between NIFWF and NOAA, we also have a lot of tools and resources available to help communities get access to information to help them find those places. And then at the back end, we very much want to know how to measure the benefits of this project. And this is a big part of our work in this area. We want to learn, we want to document those experiences, and we want to share that information back to this community, hopefully to strengthen everybody's game in terms of implementing nature-based features. So that's it. Thanks, Lynette.
Great, thank you. Suzanne, you're next, you're up.
Yeah, hi everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I am not going to share any slides, so in favor of the discussion. So if any questions come up, please do not hesitate to reach out to me directly or submit something to the chat. As Lynette introduced me, I am Suzanne Simon. I'm with Restore America's Estuaries. And for those of you that don't know, you'll hear me call it RAE, R-A-E. We are a national alliance of 10 organizations with a mission dedicated to the protection of restoration in bays and estuaries as essential resources for our nation. In addition to the funding program, I'll be briefly touching on, I'd like to make you aware of a couple of events and resources coming up. The Southern New England Estuary Program, for those of you that are in Southern New England, that request for proposals is currently open through April 16th. So go to estuaries.org. And I think maybe some of the fabulous ASBPA Tech folks will be adding some links in the chat. Also, there's a Living Shorelines Tech Transfer Program, October 19th and 20th in person, yay, in 2021 in Cape May, New Jersey. And also, last but not least, we have a really great toolkit called the Restoration Toolkit, restoreyourcoast.org. For those of you, and that's a nice segue too, in terms of folks who don't even kind of know where to begin in terms of starting a restoration project. So to the Coastal Watersheds Grant Program, it is a program within NEP, and RAE administers it on behalf of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency via cooperative agreement. This competitive fund was created by Congress, and there are congressionally mandated priorities. And so what we are doing is we're kind of working our way through some of those priorities. The first request for proposals for the program, again, it's a relatively new program. We issued that in 2020. The next RFP should be coming out within the next week or so. So by all means, stay tuned for that. It was very exciting last time, you know, with the RFP, the priorities that we chose to focus on were nutrients, loss of habitat, and coastal flooding and erosion. We ended up with over 200 letters of intent, which is the way we have it set up is, you know, as NIFWIF has the pre-proposal and full proposal, we do it very similarly. We just have different words. We call it an LOI and then a full proposal. Like I said, over 200 LOIs for over $40 million in requests. We ultimately settled on 8 final projects to award for a little over $1 million. We expect that same level, basically, about $1 million will go out. Unlike NIFWIF, our sizes are a lot smaller. We're $75,000 to $250,000 with the required non-federal match, which I know we'll touch on later. What I found interesting with our response is just a huge demand for projects in our coastal areas, which I know both NIFWIF and the coastal program have also experienced. So there's a lot of demand on the part of communities and just trying to address a lot of the challenges. The only other things I'll add to this, for the request for proposals, the way it was set up by Congress is that there are geographic restrictions. So be sure to look on the website to see where the geographic eligibility areas are. So in other words, Alaska, Hawaii, sorry. So there's big swaths that aren't included, but there's a lot that is. So if you're interested in funding, please make sure you check those out. And last but not least, I think one of the things we'll be touching on later in this conversation is our dedication to building partnerships and seeking diverse socioeconomic applicants. And so that's something we're very much looking forward to. So I'll end there and hand it over to Chris.
Great, thanks, Suzanne. I'm Chris Darnell with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and I'm just going to share a few slides about this. Oh, okay, you're going to do it. Fine. So this is the National Coastal Wetlands Conservation Grant Program. I'll apologize for the wordy slides. I'll try to go very quickly. I promise you won't be tested at the end. And this program was profiled in a podcast about an ASP BPA podcast with Derek Brockbank about 2 years ago. Next slide. Okay, so I'm going to start out talking about funding because this is sort of a unique program. It's off budget, meaning it's not appropriated dollars. It was authorized, this trust fund called the Sportfish Restoration and Boating Trust Fund was authorized by the Dingell-Johnson Sportfish Restoration Act, and it's excise taxes on fishing equipment, motorboat, and small engine fuels. So funding is typically between 18 and 24 million. This past year, or the current year is 2021 is our high mark. We had $27 million available, and the maximum awards per year are $1 million. Next slide. So I'm not going to go through this very much. I just wanted to kind of make the point that it is targeted towards long-term conservation of coastal wetland ecosystems. It does not include the state of Louisiana because Louisiana has its own program under the same statute. So this is like for all the other states, and their program is as big as all the other program for all the other states. So anyway, we do acquisition of land from willing sellers. We also do restoration and enhancement, or some combination of both. The applicants are state agencies. So if you are a third party, like a land trust or a county or a tribe, you'd have to go to the state and get them to submit an application on your behalf, and they do that all the time. Next slide. So here are the ineligible activities. We do a lot of stuff, but we don't do these things. So I just wanted to show this very quickly, just so you get a sense of what we're all about. We're all about sort of the natural resource conservation, habitat values, benefits to wildlife, and that type of thing. So I'll just point out all the projects have to be above the tidal range. It's all in watersheds, but it's above the tidal range, and there has to be at least 20 years of conservation benefits. So that's how we define long-term. Next slide. So these are the requirements. It's 25 to 50% match. It's based on whether states have a dedicated land protection or land conservation program, like an open space fund or something like that. There's reduced amounts for the territories. Match can be the value of conserved lands, which is very helpful to the applicants, and in-kind contributions. The match doesn't have to be provided by the state. It can be provided by a third party, like a county or a NGO. Next slide. So this is some of the things we take into consideration when we evaluate the applications. And so again, it's based on the amount of wetlands on the site, what their status is, whether they're declining or stable. Maritime forest on coastal barrier islands. This was a little nugget put in there by the sponsors who came from states with those types of environments. So they wanted to put the finger on the scale a little bit. But anyway, the duration again is 20 years. A lot of habitat values are come up a number of times in the criteria. Yeah, next slide. And then the service provides technical assistance to try to help applicants. We do site visits for potential projects. We provide advice on project selection and design. We help with the classification of the wetlands, which gets very technical, and do some mapping for applicants. We help with regulatory compliance, and we encourage applicants to give us a chance to take a look at the draft proposals before submitting, just to make sure that they're as strong as they can be. Next slide. So this is the timeline. Basically, we announced in February, application deadline is in the end of June, and the rest of the time, then we announced the awards in January of the following year. So we're always working 1 year ahead. So we just, last fall, we approved the 2021 grants, and we've already put out the notice of federal assistance for 2022. So next slide. And that's just contact information in case you want to reach out. We have a website where you can find some more information about the program, but I'm Chris Darnell, and my counterpart is Paul Van Ryzen, who's with another program within the Fish and Wildlife Service. Thanks.
Great, thank you. So part of what we want to do with this session is not just focus on the specific programs. While they are really important, we know that a lot of this background information and additional questions that folks may have can be directed to our speakers. You can go to the websites and get additional stuff. What we wanted to do with this panel discussion is really touch on the topics and the high-level items that Chris, Erica, and Suzanne hit on that have to do with talking about technical assistance, the match, capacity building, things that are really quite interesting for us as a broader audience to consider and see how we as ASBPA can not only help promote these particular programs and make sure that our local communities know that they're there, but also expand the types of folks that are applying. And so I'd like to start off with one of the areas that was near and dear to the three of us when we were talking about putting this panel together was being able to diversify the applicant pool in a variety of ways. And I don't want to put my finger on the scale. I know that there's a lot of ways to think of diversity, and I'm going to stop there and let the panel. I know Suzanne, you had some thoughts on it. Chris, I believe you also had some areas. So Suzanne, do you want to kick it off and get us going on this topic?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I think one of the things that we had talked about in preparing for this conversation was that there tends to be a bit of an echo chamber in terms of our applicant pool. In other words, we keep talking to the same folks and the same folks keep applying, which is great. We love you all. But at the same time, we want to make sure that a lot of these communities that really need this funding are getting the word, and the groups, not only just the communities, but the community partners as well. And so this is something that we've been looking at within Restore America's Estuaries in terms of not only the Coastal Watersheds Grant Program, but basically all of our granting programs. In consulting with some folks, one of the, I guess, two of the big things that we're looking at right now is looking at every part of the application process. Where can we minimize or remove barriers? And, that's sort of an internal process. And then in terms of outreach, we are actively developing constantly, actually, we have this ongoing list of groups that we want to make sure get the message about the RFPs and our outreach, not limited to, but including community groups, historically Black colleges and universities, things like that, just so that the word about the RFP and the opportunities and the funding get out. And I know we're going to do a little bit of a deeper dive, so I'll stop there and let Erica and or Chris chime in.
Well, my program is a nationally competitive program, so that creates a level playing field, which is sometimes difficult to achieve equity among different parts of the country. And I'll give you an example. For instance, Northwest Oregon and Washington come in with these pristine projects, and it's great because we're evaluating the resource benefits and the habitat values. They tend to do very well. And so Washington State has done the best of any state in the country, getting about 35% of the total money that's been available since 1992. So anyway, then you have other states like California where the land values are so high, they can't really buy a lot of land. So all their projects are restoration projects. And they're very small scale usually. So that's a different type of thing. And now that the big projects from the Southeast come in, with thousands of acres and low land values and great projects, but they also tend to do very well. Where we find the difficulty is with the US territories. They struggle to compete with the other states. And that wasn't really, although they were considered in the authorizing statute in terms of giving them a discount on the match, it's very difficult for them. They don't have the technical capacity to be able to invest in these applications and all kinds of baseline data. And so we're trying to figure out how to accommodate that. And it's because we're having to do it sort of post rulemaking, it's tricky, but we're considering some innovative ideas, like maybe having them just compete against each other, or maybe setting aside a portion of the money for those types of projects, because we do want to encourage more projects from the US territories. So I'll stop there.
I think everything that Suzanne and Chris said resonates with me, like, trying to get as much, exposure and focusing on outreach. I think, we've built a few things into the program, I think, that help with equity, but then I want to come back to the thing I still struggle with. We don't ask projects to compete at a national level. It's a national program, but we try to look at projects within the region where they're taking place. Do they make sense for that region? Because if you're going to go about comparing a project in Alaska to a project in Florida, I don't even know. What are you even going to do with that? And same thing, a project in the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas versus one in Texas. They're two just such completely different landscapes, and their needs are so different. So being really flexible and responding, we try to respond to what the community has identified as the need and be really flexible about what we'll fund around that. We focus on those two values, and things like baseline data collection, a lot of that kind of stuff, that's an allowable cost in our grants. So we can cover that sort of thing. The part that I really struggle with is, and I should say, we've had at least one project in every territory. I think, we've had a good diversity of communities, good diversity around the country. What worries me a lot, and I'm throwing this out there for feedback, is I worry about people who look at the funding opportunity and don't even bother applying, because we never learn anything about those people. And so I think every year that we run this program, more people hear about it, more people take a shot at it, we learn more, and we try to plow that understanding back in. And one of our big lessons learned this year is your EPA has this wonderful EJ screen data. You can get spatial information about all kinds of stuff that's going on in projects. And we use that data to look at proposals and figure out what's going on in those communities, to be like, okay, is this a community that we've not supported before? And do we want to do that? But the thing we're really missing is, how are those communities being engaged? So we've kind of focused on that in our 2021 RFP, asking applicants, okay, if you're working, if you've got this community engagement part of this, tell us what you're doing with, who are you talking to, what aspects of your project you're engaging in. So hopefully we can get better over time at understanding what this looks like and doing a better job of kind of meeting these communities where they are.
Yeah, so, a lot of these benefits when you're, not just bringing in new communities are really the economic benefits and multipliers that happen when these projects come in. I know that was something we were passionate about when we were doing our prep call as well, is being able to really look at the stimulus for local economies. Perhaps we can touch on that topic as well.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that one. One of the phrases that we've used in our RFPs, which is, it seems pretty minor, but it's actually really important, which is we look for teams that reflect the communities in which they are working. In other words, making sure that it's not just someone dropping in and doing a project in a community and leaving. We really look for, ideally, projects that engage the local folks in those communities. So one of the projects and all this information, in terms of the awardees for the 2020 round, one of the projects that we selected, it actually involves a number of the tribes in Louisiana and blending ecological knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge with more modern day approaches in terms of marsh restoration. And we're certainly hopeful that, that making sure that there are team members from the local communities, that certainly helps, at Erica's point, in terms of, the just making sure money gets back into the communities in terms of salaries. And also it helps kind of ground truth the projects a little bit too. So it's not just someone coming in saying, oh, we think this community needs XYZ. It's actually people in the community that are like, yeah, we want this project, which I think is a very important distinction and nuance.
As you're looking at go ahead, Chris. I see.
I was just going to say, in terms of my program, we don't look at that level of information. We look at but I think when the projects are evaluated, if a project is going to support recreational commercial fishing because it's or shellfish beds or that type of thing, those values I think are taken into consideration, even though they're not technically scored as part of the evaluation.
Yeah, so part of bringing folks to the table involves that match and how scary a match can be. Perhaps there's some advice for communities and how to start thinking of matches, and for us that are out there as consultants and practitioners to help bring new ideas on that.
Go ahead, Erica.
Okay, I would hope people would not be so scared as match. Our program expects a 1-to-1 non-federal match. We have a little bit of flexibility around that. I mean, I will tell you overall, I think our program has been matched about 2-to-1 all 3 years. So, yay, grantees, they're doing a great job. But, I didn't hear anybody here say that they have to have cash match. You don't have to be prepared to write a check for the other half of that project, and it goes to for federal awards, match is really about, other investment, cash and in kind that comes within the period of performance and the scope of work that you're proposing. And within that, there's just a lot of opportunities and a lot of creative things I've seen people bring to the table. If you've got fishermen who are taking you out on their vessels to collect baseline data, the value of those guys' time, their time is valuable. That is an in-kind contribution, think about those types of things. And, I think there's an opportunity for big groups to help small groups, big groups that have, like Suzanne was saying, I get really worried about the parachuting in, especially in the time of COVID, when suddenly a lot of these groups couldn't go anywhere and you sort of see projects left high and dry. Building local capacity is really important. And this is a place where you could have a small local group that's the grantee, and bigger groups could think about like, well, what of our time can we contribute? What other types of resources in terms of data and capacity, technical knowledge could they contribute that could be counted as an in-kind contribution that then helps that local community build up and be able to do this? Because it's not just a question of like doubling the dollar that we invest, like that's the statistic we talk about. But if you think about what match means, when we look at it, it's not just the money, it's what it represents in terms of partnerships, bringing a meaningful, tangible contribution to the table. And it tells us something about what's going to happen next after our grant ends. There are people who are on board and investing, so we do take it as an indicator of like, okay, there's people who have skin in the game here. And that's interesting. So, and we're willing to work with people to think about how to meet match requirements.
Yeah, I think there's an art to match, and I think we also are willing to work with applicants in advance of submitting their applications. I would say that one of the things that we do score on is other non-federal partners. So there's an incentive to sort of create these conservation partnerships where everybody brings something to the table. A lot of times states don't have the capacity to be able to put up all the match, so somebody else will. And I think it's great that we incentivize sort of conservation of putting the value of conserved lands, accepting that as match by putting a conservation easement on land that is owned by the state or is in a land trust or something like that. I think that is another way that we sort of, I guess, multiply the effect of the grant. And so there are ways to do it, which I think don't become too onerous.
Yeah, and I'll jump in with a couple of other. I agree with what Erica and Chris have said, and we're working on a demystifying match webinar that we're hoping to record and put up there. And I think to Erica's earlier point, it's hard to prove a negative. Like, we don't know who's not applying, and we don't know if part of that is because of the match requirement. So one of the things, so we're doing the webinar, and then the way it works for us, and I think this is probably true for NIFWF, we are obligated as an organization to make sure we meet match kind of on the large scale. And in some cases, similar to NIFWF, we have some folks who overmatch. And then so that gives us a little latitude in some of our other programs to say, hey, look, we can lower the match requirement for this small group because this big group has done a really great job. And so that's something we're playing with a little bit in terms of either lowering or waiving the requirement on a case-by-case basis. I want to be very clear about that. We can't get rid of it entirely. But yeah, I think I agree that I would love for match not to be scary. At the same time, there's a reality of, if you're a very small community group, and you're applying for, for us, it's a 33% match. It's still, you're asking for $100,000 to come up with 33 can be daunting, I think, if you've never done it before. So I think that's one of the barriers we're looking at, is like getting people over that initial hump. We tell folks to follow the rules, but get creative too, so it's really think broadly, in terms of what Erica and Chris were saying, is really try to think the full value of everything that everybody's bringing to the table.
So following up on that, I think that part of the magic that happens in funding is some of the recommendations that can allow folks to think about a project in a way that lets them go from one funding stream to another funding stream to another funding stream, for example. And we know that these particular programs we've talked about today each fit a niche. So do you have recommendations for the communities and applicants on how to think about their project to have them move more comprehensively from one program to another?
Boy, that's a hard question.
Well, Suzanne, you look like you were going to say something and then went on mute.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. And it looks like Erica has some really useful things to say.
Well, it's kind of a combination of the last discussion, and I don't know if this is hitting at what you're asking, Lynette, but I mean, kind of going back to the match question, I think there's a comment in the chat, I think, about, how outreach isn't enough. And I think that's right. You talk about this match question and being creative. And if you don't have the capacity to be creative, like it doesn't matter how much we tell you to be creative. You're like, I don't understand what you mean. So I think, Chris kind of put his finger on it. Like technical assistance is kind of key here. Like being able to kind of go out and spend the time and work with people, and like Fish and Wildlife Service does that, Ray does that. We have technical assistance providers, like that's our whole regional team. And we have contractors who are available to help people figure this out. So, I think that's what we have to do. If we're really sincere about getting more people into this program, then that's what we really do have to do, is kind of commit to sit there and work with them on it. I think what you're asking is a good question. It kind of goes to the same thing, which is to be able to move from program to program. I think communities have to be thinking at a certain scale and scope, right? Because all of these programs do different things. And so if you come running at this with a National Coastal Resilience Fund viewpoint, you're going to do a really good job of applying for the National Coastal Resilience Fund, but you may not do what you need to do to go apply for Fish and Wildlife Service coastal wetland grants. You may not get done what you need to get done to go apply for like a FEMA hazard mitigation grant or something. And so, it's that same question. This is what we are interested in funding through our community capacity building and planning, is to give people the resources to think at that broader scale. But that takes some capacity and some technical support, and how do people kind of get to the point where they're ready to do something like that? And I mean, I don't think it's the exclusive province of a town or a city or a county or any particular part of the country. We've seen all sorts of different approaches to it. And I think part of the support we offer is also to kind of swap stories between communities. Like, well, we saw these guys in Delaware do this super cool thing. Have you tried something like that? Or when somebody comes to us and say, we understand that you guys have funded community by community stuff before, we would like to plan for 44 communities. Is that okay? Can we send you a grant to plan for 44 communities? We're like, okay. So I think one of the ways that we can help is by being open to those ideas and trying to figure out how to do them.
Yeah, I think I like what Erica said. It's sometimes you have to think of the big picture and think and start with, okay, I need some money to do planning. So which one of these programs can I use for planning? And then I need money for implementation. And what are the rules for this one versus this one? And one of the things that I've noticed being involved in the Coastal Grants program is we get a lot of because they get a lot of points for wetlands on the site. We get sort of these triangular shaped projects, where they try to maximize the points on the wetlands, and then they seek a different program to deal with some of the uplands. So it is a little bit sort of looking across the programs. You sort of have to, sort of take a little bit from here, a little bit from there, and figure out how they complement each other.
Well, thank you. And I know we're running up on time, but I do have one question from the audience that, quite frankly, has left me stumped. So I don't know if it'll stump you too, but it's from Eric Rosina, and it talks about, do the changes in WRDA make beneficial use of dredged material count towards match? And, could it be match value for these programs?
So this is something that we just recently looked at. And I don't think it had anything to do with WRDA per se, but this is something that, where the state of Florida came to us and said, we're dredging in state waters. This is our dredge spoil. If we bring this to the table to help create a wetland, can we use that as, can we value that as in-kind match? And I believe the answer is yes. There's a technique to do that, but we did have the Department of the Interior Solicitor's Office take a look at that. And they said it's like any other thing that you bring to the table. So the trick is in the valuation. So I think that's an encouraging sign, but it's the first time that that's come up.
Yeah, I'll chime in and say, I think philosophically, yes. However, I can speak from, from the program that I administer, that there are unique rules and requirements for each program. So I would say what may fly within DOI, it might not work within another program. So I would say, again, I think philosophically, it sounds like a great idea. And you would need to probably check with your individual grant programs and any restrictions that they may or may not have.
I can see how the value of beneficial use could count as match. There may be questions that we would have to run up to lawyers at NOAA and at NIFWIF, but I do that all the time. So, bring us the question. I mean, we have had a number of NCRF projects that have intersections with BudMet projects, like the Crab Bank project in South Carolina. It's a little different. It's not really the match, but match and cost share are two different things. They're governed by different rules. And so if the dirt was paid for by non-federal money, I mean, bottom line, I think it would probably be fine.
The answers you all gave really spotlight the creativity that you've been talking about throughout the session, of being able to look at things in different ways to try to maximize these opportunities. So I want to say thank you. And if we had an audience here, I'm sure there would be, roaring applause. And so you'll just have to take mine for now. But I do encourage folks to reach out to the three of you for additional information on the nuts and bolts, and more broadly to really think about these types of programs and how we can continue to bring additional applicants and ideas to the table. Because like you guys said, you don't know who doesn't apply. You just don't know. So thank you very much. And at this point, I am going to hand it over to the Student and New Professionals chapter, because we're moving into a break. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. So we will get our break started in just a few minutes. I think we'll be sharing our screen here. So if you could take a peek at your screen, and we're also going to be asking you to open up an internet browser in order to play today's game break. So it's sponsored by the Texas chapter of ASBPA. Thank you very much for sponsoring today's game break. Their link is located in the chat if you want to check out some more information about the Texas chapter. So welcome. The Students and New Professionals chapter is hosting today's game break. The SNP chapter, we're also called. So if you hear SNP thrown around, it's the Student and New Professionals chapter. We support those who are recently entering the coastal science and policy community by providing valuable opportunities for networking, professional development, career guidance, and a monthly platform for discussing these topics. Be sure to follow ASBPA on Facebook and check out the ASBPA Student and New Professionals Facebook page to keep up with the latest and offer your comments and suggestions. So some rules about today's trivia game. You can access the trivia game by copying and pasting the link for Poll Everywhere into your web browser of choice. That link is located in the chat. It's that pollev.com link that is in the chat. So please click on that and enter the game. We'll be going through a series of 16 multiple choice questions during the games today. But first, we're going to put up a few non-competitive questions. You should see them appear on your own screen after you've followed the link. So if you're having any trouble accessing the games, please put it into the chat and our tech moderator will be able to assist you. So it looks like our first question is up, and that question is, what do you like about working from home? So in that bubble there, you should be able to enter a response.